Historic Preservation Commission is a 9-member board appointed by the City Council and serves on a voluntary basis without compensation. The purposes of the commission are to promote the educational, cultural, economic, and general welfare of the city through the preservation and protection of buildings, sites, structures, areas, and districts of historic significance and interest through the preservation and enhancement of local historic, architectural, archaeological, and aesthetic heritage found in the city, through the maintenance of the distinctive character of the city's historic districts, and through the promotion and enhancement of the city's historic and aesthetic attraction to tourists and visitors. I'd also like to take this opportunity to have the other members of the commission to introduce themselves, and we'll begin from my left and the audience right, with each member introducing him or herself.
James Long.
Brian Mann.
Carol King.
Dallas Hanbury.
And I'm Richard Baylor, and I have the honor of serving as the chairperson of this body. What we'd like to do as we begin our deliberations this afternoon is to acknowledge that the chair will now entertain a motion for the adoption of minutes of our last meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly second that we adopt the minutes of our August 13, 2019 meeting. Is there any unreadiness? There being none, all those in favor, let it be known by a show of hands. Thank you very much. Motion carried. As we begin our deliberation here this afternoon, our first order of business is the revamping the historic sign program, and our working committee members include Ms. Carol King and Dr. Dallas Hanbury. Either one of you, would you like to take it away?
Go ahead, Carol, please.
We've been working with Mid-State Advertising on redesigning a new historic marker. Christy, do you want to talk about the
handouts? You have an example of why our old sign was an issue with Landmarks Foundation and now the Montgomery Public Art Commission using the fountain as the logo. Landmarks and the HPC all look the same. It kind of looks like Landmarks is the one issuing those signs. So when we had the issue, we decided to do a redesign. So then you have a handout of a photo of City Hall, so you can look at what Midstate has given us and give us some feedback on whether or not you think it looks enough like City Hall. I think it's a little tall or needs to be a little wider. I think the scale is a little off, personally.
columns could be a little fatter too?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it would be good if the light in the middle was yellow,
Right.
because I think it still looks like
A noose.
it does.
Yeah.
To me, though, you know.
We can go back and ask them for a little more.
Anyone else? Anyone else has a?
This is, I can't help but note this is very similar to that more modern logo you see in the back on the banner for the city. Have y'all ever considered using that?
We did.
The M that looks like a column?
We decided not to because that was a branding and marketing scheme that was come up with by the current administration, and we don't know if that will endure.
Oh, maybe subject to change. Okay.
It might. So we were kind of trying to look for something that we could claim as our own. So as Carol pointed out in some of our committee discussions, that we've had this sign for 50, 60 years. Let's try to come up with something that won't need to be fiddled with for another 50 or 60 years. Or at least it'll be someone else's problem at that point.
We also did a price, the price point on these is estimated to be about $40.
About how much?
About 40.
40. Okay.
Which is a little less now, but I mean, it's going to depend upon the quantity too. Because of the techniques they use, we don't have to commit to a large amount at one particular time.
Which is what we were paying about $40 before for the old signs, but we had to purchase at least 50 of the historic building and historic district signs in advance to get them. So, as you will note, that distinction does not appear on these signs. And part of that discussion has been, we've been doing this for a long time now. It's not, we don't need to give gold stars to everyone because they live in a historic district. I think we can use some discretion and say, your house has been maintained in a manner in which we feel contributes to the character of the neighborhood, or it doesn't. And in doing that, we are, I think, also going to recommend moving to a program similar to Mobile's, where people will apply in advance. We will have a committee review those applications. We can supply feedback if there are things that could be undone that would render it eligible. And then we can place that order and actually present them to the owner at an event, which Mobile does twice a year. So they do it in June and December. But it would have the discussion about the properties kind of, owners are going to have to provide better information, so we need a better application.
Right.
But the discussion about the issues with the, non-sympathetic changes will not be taking place in a public forum. I mean, we can have a candid discussion about the type of feedback folks need to have, whether or not they've been selected, and then they make the payment and they'll be presented at a meeting instead of sending them on their way and I call them when they're ready. This way we could do it in a way that when they come to the meeting, they will be presented with their sign.
Well, and we'd also discussed that, at this point, it's been almost 25 years since there has been new historic districts added. It's been a really long time. I mean, and hopefully this would also be an impetus to some of these now 50-year-old neighborhoods to look into the designation and the protection that would come with it.
And we think that if we come up with this kind of a stylized image, like one of the reasons City Hall was kind of attractive is that Carol had found an example in some of her travels. I think it was Franklin, Tennessee. They have a cast sign, and it's got, I don't know if it's their town hall or some significant building, but it's got kind of the stylized building with the Franklin historical whatever. So I think this would translate if we wanted to.
That's true. Yeah.
To offer a higher end option of having a cast sign instead of the aluminum sign, which would be about the same size as the ones we had before, that this might give us a little flexibility in offering one or both of those options if a property owner is, passes muster and we say, you may have a sign, which one do you want?
So what are you saying about this higher end option you're talking about? Is this a sign like this put embossed, or what are you saying that you're looking at?
If you've seen more like, there are different ways to do it, either like a metal or a resin thick plaque that would be cast. So the letters are probably going to be raised kind of,
Right.
I don't think I can take it off, but the seal on the front of the podium here is very busy, but
Raised.
3D.
Right.
but it would be a three-dimensional versus just the flat printed sign. Because I know Brian had expressed interest in having something like that as an option. I don't think that for a large number of our historic district residents that we expect the cost of that would probably exceed the interest in some of our districts. But I think if we come up with a good logo that would translate across multiple mediums, that we can have some options available.
Right.
Also, maybe y'all discussed this, the colors and all that. I don't have any problem with the colors, but the longevity, the materials that it's been made out of, and we've investigated it, we know that these are gonna be long-lasting kind of colors.
Long-ish lasting.
Yeah.
I think the screen process, I think signs that were at least exposed to a lot of sun or weather probably had 10 to 15-year lifespan. My understanding from previous discussions of this digital printing on metal is that it's more UV resistant. So I
Right.
think it'll hold up better than our previous signs, just because of the way the signs are produced now.
Right.
And, okay, Mid-State Signs is gonna do this. There's no sort of guarantee, no sort of anything that comes with it that assures there's not gonna be a problem with this. This is a new thing.
Well, I think they have state-of-the-art processing at this point. And that was, when we were talking about the sign, they were, of course, aware of the process we were using, and of course, nobody uses that anymore. Everybody's doing this. And that was actually one of my questions, was the durability of the ink. Does it come with UVA, UVB protection? And she was saying that. But so I think that I think they're very knowledgeable. And of course, I'm a trusting person too, because this is not anything I know
I would
that
feel
much about.
I would feel more comfortable with at least a statement from them that tells us or discusses to us the durability
What the
of what we're
qualities
doing.
of that
Right.
UV, that
The,
digital printing.
The laminated vinyl.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure
Okay.
they've got some sort of
Specs.
that talks about exposure and fade and that sort of thing. I'm going to make a note. Our old signs have rounded corners, which they cut in-house, and I would suggest we continue with the round, non-pointy corners.
It's just what we lawyers call due diligence, to sort of just look into.
Right. No, I'm sure we can get some specs on the digital print.
Okay. It's the 63, that 63 poundage or whatever you call it. It's the aluminum panel. I know that, but we can ask them about what the application is on the face of it.
Anyone else? Any other
So,
comments? Yes.
so I guess at the next meeting then, we'll find out how resistant it is to the elements, and hopefully they'll have
Hopefully we'll have-
incorporated some of the design changes that we've suggested. Because, we've been doing this for a while now.
Yeah,
Yes, we have.
getting closer.
Good deal.
Let
And
me
it may
just ask
be-
this one question.
It may be that we want to see if we can go over and sit with whoever's working on it and
Right.
have them squish it and fatten it,
Exactly.
so we're not going back and forth.
Exactly.
And
I
it may
think
be
that's a
able to
really
knock
good
it out
idea.
in like 30 minutes.
We did send them photographs I went and sent, of the facade, but it's got those big banners in front, so they kind of didn't get, and they'll be there for several months. But
Yeah.
this is a good photo that you've got before, pre-banner. The birthday banners will be there through at least November or December, so.
I'm sorry, Dr. Bailey, you had a question.
No, not a question. I think you all have taken care of what I was about to ask, so I'm fine. Any other comment? Everybody's good with what we've brought to the table? Okay. Thank you very much. Our revamping the historic sign program. Let me just ask this one question. Has anyone here found themselves driving through the city of Montgomery and noticed some of these signs? Have you noticed some of these signs?
Yeah, they're all over our neighborhood.
Okay, very good.
In Capitol Heights. And
What is the general reaction or response to the neighbors to these signs?
it's just my impression that if you're own a historic home and you're proud of it, you wear this as a badge of honor on your home.
Okay. All right.
When I bought my house, it's one of the first things I did was come seek recognition. And a lot of new homeowners, new owners of old historic homes will seek this.
All right. Good enough.
And I think, one of the things we talked about was we'll we can do some marketing for it. And I think
Right.
this is an opportunity to do some education, because a lot of times I will get a call and someone will say, I bought a house, you know, on LeBron Road, and it's not designated. I said, well, it is designated. Well, it doesn't have a sign. I said, well, that just means that the previous owner didn't purchase a sign. That's all it means. You are in the district. That I think this is an opportunity with that relaunch of the sign program to talk about what it means. You know, that if you're in a district, you may be eligible, and just because a house doesn't have a sign doesn't mean it's historic, not historic, you know, and just kind of, there are a number of things that have come up over the years that this may be an opportunity to kind of put in one place, to have that information.
Okay.
I happen to notice on the art, this form here, it just has our group's name, but you mentioned the distinction between being in a district and being designated as a historic building. Will there be any difference in the new signage
No.
like we had in the old?
I'm proposing, I would recommend that we eliminate that,
Right.
because it won't say building or district. If you get one of these new signs, it means that your property is up to snuff by historic standards. It has not had significant alterations, at least visible from the street. You know, it retains historic materials. It hasn't had front porches enclosed. You know, that it retains those characters that are important for whichever style of house it is.
Okay, takes care of your concern.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good enough. All right. As we proceed here this afternoon, preservation leadership class workshops, committee persons, Dallas Hansberry, Brian Mann, and Carol King.
If I may, I'd like to apologize to my fellow working committee members for not being available this summer, and I will do better this fall. Had a lot going on.
Thank you.
So Carol and Christy and I met, I believe last month, and we went over the results of the end of class survey, and some things they really liked and some things they did not.
Oh, and I have learned since then, the person who did the preservation in the law class is retiring October 1, so she wouldn't be available to do it again anyway,
So
which
preservation,
we've excluded.
preservation and the law we have dropped because universally it was hated, would be, or strongly disliked.
I think we did.
Shouldn't do it in.
I think they thought it was. A couple of comments was that it was more like a CLE, and I think we decided that we can probably incorporate the important elements from that into the class, which they also didn't
Someplace
like,
else.
on the architectural review board. But
Which we're
that's-
keeping.
Which we're keeping because that's really the nuts and bolts
Mhm.
of how the districts work. So we think whether they like it or not, they need to hear about it.
Right.
So I think we're going to be able to roll some of those components into that class.
We're going to keep the history class. That was universally applauded. And then we talked about splitting up the house parts and terminology into multiple classes because while it was appreciated and liked, most respondents felt that it was a lot of information to process in just one class. What else, Christy?
And then we reintroduced a class on survey,
Yeah.
which it was actually the first PowerPoint I did for the last class, and we didn't end up using it. And the way I had set that up is to work through the Alabama Historical Commission's architectural survey form by using a photograph and going part by part, because it'll reinforce the style and terminology that would have been offered in the previous two classes. So it'll help reinforce some of that information where folks said it was great, but they felt overwhelmed by what they were given.
So we're going to put in that experiential learning component through the survey, basically.
Yes, and
Yeah.
we're hoping
Hands-on.
if we do it at Huntington that we might be able to go over to
Yeah.
College Street or College Court and just look at some of the houses and talk about the form and how to identify different roof types and that sort of thing.
One of the things that we had a discussion about that I imagine that the board would like to comment on is the Oakwood tour. People liked it, but there were differing opinions on what about that experience they liked the most. So I think that's something. What did we end up deciding on?
They
that?
liked having dinner in the cemetery.
And like the ambiance, they were, yeah, but
I mean, I think they just thought that was they got to go home and tell their friends that they had dinner in the cemetery. I think they really liked Philip Taunton's discussion. I was waiting for food, so I didn't get to hear it.
It was very good, yeah.
it was good. Yeah.
But I think it ended up being a little shorter than we expected and maybe not as in-depth as we had hoped. So I think it's worth keeping, but I think we're going to have to explore some other options on getting that better presented.
Do you want to talk about the Windows workshop? Or
We can. I have not gotten anything back from Hilda, but Carol and I met with Hilda Dent because one of the things that did come out of the survey as well is that they would like to, the participants were interested in hands-on classes. So Carol and I went to Hilda's workshop and kind of walked through and really laid out what we think a half-day Saturday workshop would look like with her. We have some money in the budget to do that. I'm waiting on her to get some numbers on what it's going to cost for her to have some of her people there manning the different workstations and explaining what they're doing and showing people how to do that piece of the window component, as well as some supply issues of disposable dust suits for lead paint exposure if anybody wants that and those sorts of things. So I'm hoping if we don't hear from her or get something from her in the next week or so, we're probably going to have to punt it to January, February, because we were targeting October 26th for that date, just looking at her availability and to get the materials out and registration back in prior to that because the space is very confined. I don't know that we'd have enough turnaround if it got pushed too much more than a week to get everything together and out.
and that concludes our report.
Thank you. But before we leave that, does anyone has a question, comment? All right. We just want to leave this discussion with the point that the class was well received and that we had people still trying to enroll in the class even after we had cut off the period for enrollment. So we just want to let people know that that class was overwhelmingly successful in terms of the participants and the people who were still trying to get in after we'd closed it out because we didn't have space.
And I ran into several people who said, I had no idea you were doing that.
That's
if
right.
I had known. So I think with some of the tweaks made to the offering, we also eliminated the code and renovation issues session. Between the tweaks, and then we had several of the class members who offered to help with marketing and curriculum issues. That I think that was kind of positive. That they thought it was good, but they think there are some folks in there who have particular skills that they think can help us make it better. And I think that being the case, it'll probably be an evolving.
Let me just ask this one question. Do you think we have a room at Huntington if we decide to return to Huntington for an additional 10 attendees?
A bigger room. you
Yes.
mean?
I'm sure Brian could speak to his contact there and find out if.
There are rooms at Huntington that could handle more people, but
I don't know that
They
we want
may
a
not
bigger
have
group.
they wouldn't have the workspace you would have.
Gotcha.
That room,
That
you
room
have a
was
lot of
perfect.
room.
It was a great
There's a
room.
lecture hall that has that little teardrop thing that you would just have room to have a pad on that would seat more people, but no, that's probably the best room on campus
I-
for this seminar.
I
Good
think
enough.
that was a manageable size group.
Sure. Okay.
to,
That makes a difference.
just in terms of what I can physically be able to put together and manage.
Sure.
And we're only planning, well, even doing the survey workshop, if we walk out, if that group's too big, I mean, Dr. Bailey, you know,
Right.
doing your walking
We
tours,
may have to
that,
split the
that
group with that
it might
too.
be hard to,
That's right.
to communicate or
You know,
do that effectively.
if you, one thought, just random thought, if you wish to expand the class, you could do we could do a rebroadcast if you wanted to do a YouTube video after the fact for people that were just interested in
We're working on that.
that were just interested in
We
what was the
taped-
presentation.
We tape the classes. I just haven't gotten them all put together. I need to put them together with the PowerPoints that were presented because
Edit 'em.
the guys upstairs can kind of weave those together. So we're working on, we did film we did all the classroom presentations. I'm not sure how the walkthrough did. That may not be worth doing, but we do at least have the 4 classroom presentations filmed.
Okay. All right.
I just wanted to say that, to commend again the staff for those classes. They were very good. I attended every one of them, and they were very good. But I do agree, tweaking will make it even better. Some of the things may be even over my head. As a lawyer, I didn't see that it would be necessary for a class at that level, some of that legal stuff. And so I think some of the tweaking would be really good, make it even better.
All right. Thank you very much. 2020 awards, we decided to consider holding off on our discussion until the fall. And our working committee members, we do want to acknowledge who volunteered for 2020, Cindy Keeping, Doug McCants, James Long, Carol King. These are the persons who have volunteered for 2020. And if anyone else wants to add his or her name to that list, I don't think you'd be turned down. Christy, other business?
Just a brief update on the situation you all heard about, was it last month before, the First Baptist request to demolish the First Presbyterian Church. The Architectural Review Board delayed that request for 6 months. By code, they are permitted to do so to allow for interested parties to try to come to an agreement or compromise with the petitioner. We had a meeting with the pastor and some members of First Baptist Church last week, and at this point, they are willing to consider a sale of the property. So we are working toward that, kind of down 2 tracks. I'm meeting with the Historical Society's board tomorrow, where I hope they will render a decision and then do something in partnership with Landmarks Foundation. The 2 tracks are to raise money to purchase the building through a nonprofit, and the second piece of that would be to find an owner or a new owner who might be interested in developing the property as it stands. And I have spoken to a couple of people who might be interested in that aspect of it, and there have been some discussions with the Opportunity Alabama, who kind of manages the Opportunity Zone Fund opportunities in the state. And he thought he might have a couple of prospects as well, so stay tuned. We'll see how it goes.
When you say sell the property, do you mean the entire church property or just the historic structure?
Well, technically it's all historic structure.
Well,
It's all designated.
yeah,
But,
you-
so,
the-
but there are 2 pieces, and I know the Historical Society's interest is in the 1880 addition to the 1840s sanctuary. There's about 31,000 square feet of additional space that was added in the 40s and 50s. They don't want to take all of that on. My concern with that plan is that you've chopped up most of the square footage you have that might produce income to help maintain the historic portion of
I
the
guess I
property.
should rephrase my question. The church is interested in selling the entire,
They will entertain selling the entire piece of property. They will also entertain selling off just the sanctuary and the 1880s edition that wraps around the back of it with a desire to demolish the rest of it to build something there. But they have also said that they would consider finding another location to build the facility they need, but would like a leaseback option. So if someone purchases it, they want to continue leasing the space until their building program is complete.
Thank you for bringing that back up to our attention, and I hope we'll keep track of that. Of all the issues that I've had since I've been on this commission, I had a lot of comments about that sale,
Yeah.
and they do not want us to drop this issue, even in some communities that you would think would not necessarily care about it. That church is known, and there are some people interested in wanting to make sure it's preserved if possible.
Okay, all right. And we do want to keep people informed of what's going on. As we proceed here, one of the things that we love to close our meeting out each second Tuesday is just reminding Mr. and Mrs. Montgomery, if you find some artifact, old book, old photograph, or something of historic value in your estimation, and you feel that we need to know about it, give Ms. Christy Anderson a call, or Ms. Paula Wade a call, or some members of the commission here a call. And if you like to bring that to our commission meeting, let one of those persons know, and you can discuss it with them. And we've had some phone calls. In fact, I've talked to some people who have found some things that I mentioned to them how they can investigate further the historic value of what they found. But Ms. Christy Anderson, would you mind mentioning one particular item that has been brought to our attention?
A contractor called a few weeks ago, and they were pulling up some flooring in a house on LeBron in Cloverdale, Idlewild, and found a shipping tag and a manufacturing label on the back of the flooring. And he was upset with himself when he brought it in, because apparently in transport in the back of his truck, this tag had been intact and it tore off. But he came back by this afternoon and found 2 more boards, and they were 8 and 10 feet long. And I said, I don't need an 8 or 10 foot long section of board, but he's going to chop it off and bring it back, so we'll have the label.
That's good.
Yeah.
So the addressee on that was someone care of the Gay Teague Hotel, and one of the questions the contractor asked or thought, he's like, well, do you think this was flooring that came out of the hotel and was put in this house? And I told him that it was not uncommon for people to actually live at hotels. I mean, it could have been someone who was building this house and living in a hotel and having goods shipped to him care of the hotel. But we don't know.
Okay, okay. But here again, if you find an old photograph, an old book, certificate, whatever you think is of historic value, bring it to our attention. If you have some questions about it, and we may be able to help you determine what to do with it. one item in particular was brought to my attention last month that is, a person who found a stone with a month and a year on it that's over 100 years old, and that person wanted some additional information on how to proceed with determining the historic value of that. So whatever it might be, just bring it to someone's attention before you put it in the trash. And you never know what you've found in terms of how valuable that item might be. And before we leave this afternoon, just like to ask Ms. Carol King, if you just give us an update on the program at Old Alabama Town scheduled for September 20 and 21st.
Right, Dr. Bailey, we have the Slave Dwelling Project, which is an actual, a national project, with Joseph McGill out of South Carolina will be visiting Old Alabama Town and Montgomery on Friday, next Friday, the 20th and 21st. Mr. McGill will do a presentation at 6 o'clock at the Old Alabama Town Reception Center, 301 Columbus Street, and that will generally be about the slave dwelling project, the places he slept around the country. That is his method of operation in bringing attention to the enslaved here in this country. On Saturday, the next day, we will have Jerome Bias, who is a foodways historian, will actually be cooking in our Ordeman Mitchell Shaw slave dwelling as well. It's both are open to the public and free.
Okay. Any question or comment anyone would like to ask her about the program at Old Alabama Town? Any question? Okay. Thank you very much. And as we close, we want to acknowledge the presence of our other commissioner, Mr. Douglas McCants. Would you just like to say a few words before we close out this afternoon? Welcome anyway. Anything else? As we close, I'd like to again thank Ms. Christy Anderson and Ms. Paula Wade for taking time out from their busy schedules to come out and join us this afternoon. We appreciate your assistance very much. That being said, this meeting is hereby adjourned. Thank you.